I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time. I think, frankly, anybody running for president should take a cognitive test. They say it's unconstitutional, but I would say in that particular case, having a cognitive test wouldn't be so bad.
Hello and welcome to Tracking Trump on DeKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. This week we focus on the story that's making huge headlines in America and around the world. Did the inner circle of former President Biden cover up his mental and physical health issues, particularly in the last year of his presidency? A new book by journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson called Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again, has just hit bookstores. The book alleges that 82-year-old Biden's health issues were much graver than we thought, and that there was a concerted effort to hide the truth from the public. Now, this is important because Mr. Biden then went on to run for re-election in 2024, a decision that many Democrats were wary of as well, but were too afraid to speak up. We know the outcome of that decision because after a disastrous performance in the first television debate with Donald Trump, Joe Biden was forced to drop out of the race and Kamala Harris had to step in. But Biden reportedly believes still today that this was a mistake. Many say that Trump's victory was because of this ham-handed approach to the campaign by the Democratic parties. But others say it would not have made a difference to Trump's win, which in any case was inevitable. The release of this new book coincides with the announcement that Mr. Biden has an aggressive form of prostate cancer, which has spread to his bones. Even this diagnosis has been at the center of a political row. Ultimately, all of this raises bigger questions about whether the Democrats have what it takes to defeat Trump and the Republicans in the midterm polls in 2026. Well, joining us now on DeKoder to look at the impact this new book is having on the Democratic Party in particular, whether it really would have made a difference if Biden had chosen not to run right at the beginning of the campaign, and so much more. We have two terrific commentators joining us today. Spencer Critchley is a Democratic political strategist and also the author of the book Patriots of Two Nations. He's joining us from Monterey, California. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Critchley. And I'm happy to have a colleague, Seema Sirohi, a columnist with the Economic Times, who wrote a terrific book, Friends with Benefits, the India-US Story. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you both very much for being with us. Mr. Critchley, if I can ask you first, how is the Democratic Party handling the revelations in Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's book on the alleged cover-up surrounding Mr. Biden's health? And given that it's come at a time when his own cancer diagnosis has been made public, has it made it perhaps even more awkward for leaders within the party to ask some difficult questions?
Yes, I think it's made things extremely difficult. And assuming that these stories are true, and we have no reason to doubt them, the reporters involved are excellent, and other reporters back up their findings with multiple sources. So I think, unfortunately, we have to assume these stories are more or less true. I don't know how the Democratic Party can deal with this effectively, except face it head on, and anybody involved in keeping this quiet or trying to shape the reality about it needs to apologize and probably get out of the way. If there's one advantage that Democrats have had against Donald Trump, is that they supposedly stand up for integrity, the truth and respect for our system of government, which depends on respect for integrity and the truth. Everybody tends to assume that politicians are always lying, but actually in the United States, while they will certainly spin, it's very rare for a politician, especially in a senior position of authority, to outright lie. And the contrast with Donald Trump is so dramatic in this regard because he just is lying constantly and often flagrantly, as if he enjoys just how outrageous his lies are. And for the Democrats to sacrifice this piece of high ground, which I would say is the central piece of high ground for Democrats, that they do stand up for democracy, the rule of law, and the basic integrity we expect of public officials is extremely damaging. And they'll be forced to make arguments like, well, Trump is worse. And that's not a good place to be.
Mr. Critchley, you worked with the Democratic Party on their election campaigns. And just going back to the 2024 campaign, even way before this book came out, you know that there were lots of whispers and speculation about the state of Mr. Biden's health. It was painfully visible when one would see him on television. And within the party, there were some who perhaps reluctantly tried to speak up on this, but they really couldn't be heard. What was going on within the Democratic Party at this time when the decision about re-election, etc., was being taken? Were there actually a large number of voices that were worried about him recontesting privately?
Well, I was not on the inside of any of this, but I can say among Democrats generally, there were concerns, but it was a genuinely difficult judgment to make. Joe Biden has suffered from speech difficulties for his entire life, as is well known, having had a severe stutter as a child. Also, just as a personality, he was famous throughout his career for these Bidenisms, as they were often called, these gaffes he would make, and misspeaking, getting words wrong, that sort of thing. And people would just chalk it up to that's Joe Biden. And counterbalancing that was his obvious intelligence and knowledge, and really his dramatic success in his first term as president. So I don't think it was easy if you were not on the inside. There were many seasoned journalists who came away from meetings with Joe Biden, and including not that long ago, saying he's very impressive and he seems to be on top of everything. Now, according to these reports now, that depended on the time of day you reached him and how he was feeling. But really, if you look at the record of the Biden administration, much as Trump likes to say it was a disaster, as is usual with Trump, the reverse is the truth. It was really one of the most accomplished presidential administrations, certainly in modern times. And he was intimately involved in all of the decisions he should have been involved in. So, as I say, I think it was genuinely difficult at the time, unless you were spending hours in the room with him, which most people weren't. And it was easy for most Democrats to assume that these attacks on his age were the entirely predictable attacks from the opposing party.
Seema, Sirohi, you've been covering US politics for a long time, and as someone who's looking at the issue from the outside, as it were, with a different pair of eyes, how is the controversy over the book playing out there? And do you genuinely believe, when you look back at the way the election played out, that it would have made a difference if Mr. Biden had not been on the ticket at all?
Hi, Nidhi, and thanks for having me. The book is very explosive. There are too many details to sort of, believe that this wasn't true. With all due respect to your other guests, I think Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson have done a good job. 400 people they have talked to. As to the point of, those, unless you were on the inside, you wouldn't have known. Well, there were people on the inside. That is the whole crux of the book. What they call the Politburo. There were 3 people, mainly, the senior advisor, the chief of staff, and the first lady, who protected the president from any bad news, it sounds like. So I think the decline was quite visible in 2021. And he made gaffes, and they were beyond his normal gaffes. He was wandering off the stage at international, events like the G7 summit. So lots was going on, and the Democratic Party and the White House basically said, oh, this is a Republican plot and everything is doctored. Well, I would ask my Democratic Party friends, and they would say the same thing. And I said, look, not every video can be doctored. Anyway, we are where we are now. As for the fact that if President Biden hadn't been in the race this time around whether the Democrats would have won. I kind of doubt it because, remember, even if they had a different candidate, even if Biden had said that I'm a transitional president, let somebody else run back early on in his term, his policies that brought his, defeat were immigration and inflation. Let's just take these two big ones. So he wasn't on top of the game on immigration. According to the book, there were various factions, fighting, and everybody was getting his or her pound of flesh. And as you saw, that became a very big issue. Inflation again. There was some fundamental errors his economic team made, overheated the economy. So I think any candidate would have struggled. Even the best candidate would have
So,
struggled.
in a way, you're saying Trump's win was inevitable.
I wouldn't use the word inevitable. It would have been extremely hard to make the case that Biden administration has done a good job when it clearly was fumbling on some major issues that were resonating with the people, and at the same time, without being disrespectful to the president, a sitting president, to make the case, I'm going to do something different. People had stopped trusting the party by then. The party had nothing new to say. And I don't know, in a hypothetical world full of miracles, maybe somebody else would have won.
That's a good way to put it. Mr. Critchley, would you agree with Seema Sirohi's assessment of that? And your book actually, you said that Trump's win was inevitable. So do you believe that it was going to be this anyway, whoever would have been on the ticket?
Well, let me clarify a couple of things. First of all, I agree with much of what Seema just said. I agree that the people close to Biden could see this happening, that the reporting on this looks very solid, and they have a great deal of responsibility for what does look like a cover-up. I think that as far as the wider Democratic public is concerned, it was a more difficult call. They could see that he was clearly aging, and they did have concerns, but for the reasons I said, I think there are other issues. Also, my book, I was arguing that a figure like Trump was inevitable in 2016 and around this time, whether it was Trump or not, and whether it's any particular year or not. And that's because of broader cultural features in the United States that date back to the founding, which I explore in my book. So it's not just Trump, it's two completely different visions of what America is that is dividing the country at the moment, and Trump represents one of them at this moment. In terms of policies, something I often argue, and I'm in something of a minority about this, especially in Democratic circles, is that policies actually do not matter all that much to voters. It's how the policies feel to voters that matters. Most voters don't understand policy details, and even if they're capable of understanding them, they don't have the time to investigate them. And what they do is choose leaders they believe they can trust to do a good job, especially do a good job for people like them. If you look at just the facts of Biden's record, inflation, for example, the Republicans were hammering him all the time because inflation did spike early in his presidency. But if you actually look at the facts of what happened, it spiked all over the world. That couldn't possibly have been Biden's fault. And it came down faster than almost everywhere else in the world. And Biden's economic performance overall was described famously by The Economist towards the end of his presidency last fall as the envy of the world. But those are the facts. Facts don't win elections. People felt bad about inflation, which, despite what I just said, was worse than it had been for a long time. And they weren't going to listen to the bullet points I just gave. So that was a politically difficult challenge. Similarly, with immigration, there was a huge spike in asylum seekers. But they responded too late, I would say, and they did get it under control. Again, the facts don't matter much because it felt terrible to people. And for me, and I think this is sort of similar to the point Seema is making, it's that the Democrats, in my view, the Democratic Party generally, and many of its candidates, not all of them, but many of them, have become incompetent at politics. So what they will do is go on and on about policy, and then they'll have these endless internal arguments about policy details, and keep losing elections they should win, or when they do win, it's in a squeaker, no matter how bad the opposing candidate is. And politics isn't really about policy. It's about how people feel about your candidate and how they feel
I
about your
think that's an
party. And
interesting
right now,
point.
they don't feel good about the Democrats.
That's an interesting point, and that gives me the cue to ask both of you. I'll ask Seema this question first. Let's just look into the future for a moment. And you've got midterm elections in the US that are in 2026. There's still some time away. But, who in the Democratic Party, who next? And, we are all sitting very far away here in India, but, we are interested in seeing what the next leadership could look like. Is there any leadership now?
Well, in terms of the next presidential election, the Democratic Party bench is solid. They have many governors, and governors will do better than somebody who's an insider, like a Washington, D.C. politician. So Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, and Gavin Newsom in California. So they have a good bench. But the problem is, the Democratic Party still can't look at issues, front and center. They're still debating why they lost. They don't get it. They've become so insular, so dependent on consultants and strategists that they're not out in the street. The polls were showing that the voters didn't think Biden should run again back in 2021, 2022. But those polls were not shown to Biden himself, and the staff kept protecting him, and everybody played along. So what does that show? It's become so insular. They don't care about the people. They just scratching each other's back. So I would say that now there's some amount of debate going on. It's more along the lines of old versus young. So small groups are forming in the Democratic Party. Small groups are forming at local levels to try to do something, get new candidates into the picture. Because in DC, at the House and Senate level, they're still out, in the la-la land, I would say. They don't
Let me get Spencer Critchley to respond to that. Seema, made a snide one about strategists, but I don't think she was talking about you. But if you could weigh in on that, as Seema Sirohi said, a good bench strength. But yes, are the Democrats insular? Are they living in echo chambers and not really able to come to grips with what went wrong and therefore how to strategize for the next election?
Yes, I do agree with that. And I think a big part of the problem is those strategists and consultants, many of whom I'm sorry to say I think are hacks. They just keep running the same strategies they've been running for 20 or 30 years. And I've written about this just recently, actually. This just went live a couple of days ago. And I'm publishing drafts of chapters of my next book, which I'm calling The Liberal Backbone is its working title, essentially about what happened to the liberal backbone and how do liberals find it again. And the latest chapter is about alienation. And I think that this is perhaps the key problem that Democrats face, is that they become alienated. This is the condition that afflicts people who live in the modern post-Enlightenment science-dominated world, where it's a very powerful way of thinking in that it gives us things like scientific progress and democracy. But on the other hand, if you only think about everything rationally and you try to quantify everything and measure everything, and in politics you have to do polls and focus groups all the time and have meetings with lots of consultants and analyze everything to death, you lose the spontaneous human connection that's at the center of politics. And I think this is another way of saying what Seema is saying. I think this is a terrible problem, and Democrats are. The trouble is, once you get stuck in this frame of mind where you filter everything through this rationalistic analysis, it can feel like it's impossible to escape because you can't imagine another way of being. So Democrats just keep doubling down on more polls and more debates and more fights and testing this and testing that and trying this slogan and that slogan, and none of that is going to help.
Let me ask both of you one quick last question. On the day that we're recording this show, we woke up to headlines about President Trump's latest crackdown on Harvard University and the ban on the enrollment of international students, Harvard has now hit back and sued the Trump administration for this decision. Just a quick comment from both of you on this unprecedented standoff, not just between Harvard and Trump, but the entire university system as a whole in the US at the moment. Spencer Critchley, to you first. This has gotten quite ugly, and international students who make up a huge chunk of Harvard's students are in the lurch at the moment because they've been told, even those who are already there, that they'll have to transfer to another school or face the prospect of being thrown out of the US.
It's extremely concerning. This could not be more serious because it's just part of this multidimensional plan to overthrow democracy, which sounds like overheated language, but it's exactly what we're seeing. The Trump administration is following the authoritarian playbook. What do if you want to replace democracy with authoritarianism? You attack the institutions of democracy, one of which, of course, is higher education. This is why they attack journalism, why they attack the federal government, why they attack the rule of law, why they attack the judiciary. One by one, they're going down the checklist of what defines a functioning democracy and trying to dismantle it in favor of one-man rule in the person of Donald Trump or whoever succeeds him. So it could not be more concerning. Furthermore, even if you don't care about democracy, it's utterly stupid because Harvard University and universities like it, our education system in general, combined with our welcome to students and other people coming to us from around the world, is the absolute bedrock of American strength. And this, along with Trump's economic policies and his destruction of America's worldwide reputation, it's as if he's trying to weaken America.
Very strong words. Seema, Sirohi, there are so many Indian students who form part of the Harvard student body as well. In fact, they're among the largest groups of students who are there. Just your quick thoughts, on this unprecedented standoff.
This is very serious, and it's going to impact Indian students who are the largest, body of international students in this country. So yes, this is very concerning, and he's just sort of breaking the system. But I think I want to watch a little bit, because I think the courts will intervene and all this will come to an end, hopefully, through the judicial system. In the meantime, those who are against all this within this administration, hopefully will get some time with the president and tell him how self-destructive this whole thing is. Because international students, okay, maybe he's trying to get at Chinese students. I've heard that vaguely, to try to get rid of a lot of what some people here consider sort of spies from the Chinese Communist parties. So let's see if the courts can sort it out. But this is a very, very problematic issue.
Absolutely.
And the government of India will have its hands full. Already
it has its hands quite full with Mr. Trump, as you know, Seema, because he's been taking credit for the India-Pakistan ceasefire, I think, 8 times already. Delhi is not happy about that, but I would love to meet the person in his administration who has the guts to go and tell him the truth and say, you're being self-destructive, because he'll just turn around and say you're fired. And, is he going to listen to the courts? I think that's another issue, because we've seen that, for example, on some deportation issues, they haven't listened to the courts. It's shocking to see American democracy unravel in this way. But at least I hope, for the sake of students who are stuck in the lurch at the moment, that there is a resolution to this sooner rather than later. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us, looking back at the Biden-Trump campaign and at this instant news break about Harvard University versus Trump. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
And we leave you with the soundbite of the week. Actually, it's not a soundbite by Donald Trump. It's one by the South African president, who was in the White House this week and was subjected to false news by the US president about white people in South Africa being persecuted in a genocide. It's not true. And with a pretty straight face, the South African president said to Mr. Trump that he was sorry he couldn't offer him a plane. Listen in.
Think of this. Why did a country give an airplane to the United States Air Force? Okay? The United States, not to me, to the United States Air Force, so they could help us out, because we need an Air Force One until that's Air Force One. It's being built. 2 of them being built. But Boeing's a little bit late, unfortunately. So why did they give us a plane to the United States Air Force? That's what that idiot talks about after viewing a thing where thousands of people are dead.
I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you.
I wish you did. I'd take it. I would take it. If your country offered the United States Air Force a plane, I would take it.